Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our November CoC convening. We're so glad that you could join us this morning. We have a lot to talk about. The Continuum is very busy, has been and will continue to be this winter as we get into the holiday season and the many items we have coming up in December, January. So lots to share with you all today, and encourage folks to use the chat feature in the Zoom. We will obviously offer time for questions during each section of the presentation, and we'll kind of hop into what our content will be today, and appreciate everyone, as I said earlier, making sure you stay on mute if you're not speaking so that we can clearly hear those who are. So we're going to be spending some time in the first part of our meeting today talking about lots of CoC news and announcements. Excited to share more with you all about the Blueprint Council elections that are going on right now. The election process has started. We'll be talking about that in the remaining timeline that we have for the election this year. I'm going to be handing it over to my colleague, Amy Gibson, to talk about the Homeless Persons Memorial Service, and hand it back over to me to talk a little bit about the pit count and how we are preparing for the 2022 point in time count. And then moving into just a quick update about winter contingency sheltering and the sheltering that we do in the season from November 1st to March 31st every year. And then finally, ending out our announcements with just a short update from the city team, who has been helping lead our Continuum of Care program application, and giving you all a brief update about what the application looked like this year and our submission that actually just happened over the weekend. So we were on the ball this year and we're able to submit a couple days early, which we're really excited about. Okay, and then we'll close out the last part of our meeting with a rehousing progress report from our friends with the Home Now team and my colleague Danielle Bagwireman. And Chelsea Herring-Cozy is going to lead us in a council conversation with Dr. Kane and Dr. Merritt to a little get to know you this morning with two of our Blueprint Council members, learning more about them and their involvement in the council. So.
And Rachel, before we get rolling, I'm going to throw a challenge out to the group, an acronym challenge. We're trying to, again, be very intentional about not using lots of acronyms and making sure that language is resonating. So if there's acronyms being used, feel free to throw up the surprised, confused emoji face. And hopefully that'll shake us out of acronyms and we can spell out what things are actually standing for.
Absolutely.
So acronym challenge to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. It's one that I think about every day, especially when we have big groups like this, and know lots of people have various experiences with our different programs and activities. So thank you for that reminder for everyone. So I just want to say first that I apologize that I'm going to be providing this update, but Kay Wiles, who was our nominating committee member who was representing the group this morning, had a family crisis emergency and was unable to attend this morning. So send your thoughts to her, but I apologize. I'll be doing this brief update on behalf of the nominating committee. She was looking forward to sharing this information, but she was unable to be here today. So apologize for that, but we'll just keep moving forward. And certainly I am able to answer any questions that folks have, or bring those questions forward to the nominating committee if anyone has anything that I can address. Our Blueprint Council elections began with our process of nominating candidates, and the nominations do close today, November 16th at 5 p.m. So please consider nominating a colleague or a friend or yourself for the Blueprint Council today before 5 p.m. We're going to be able to provide links to the various web pages that we're going to be sharing in the presentation today in the chat as well. So I'll go ahead and share that link in the chat after I'm done speaking, so that anyone who'd like to submit a nomination can go ahead and do that when before the 5 p.m. deadline today. As a reminder for those who may be less familiar with our Blueprint Council, we are going to be electing 4 individuals this season. And the first 2 seats are for individuals with lived expertise. Those individuals can be anybody in the community who has lived experience at any point in their life. And they don't have to demonstrate anything other than sharing that they have that lived experience and that they are interested in being on the Blueprint Council. So we encourage the nominations from anybody in the community and self-nominations as well. We're also electing 2 direct service provider seats. One of those seats is being held aside for a crisis response provider, which would include anybody who is working at an agency who is a shelter, transitional housing, a safe haven program, street outreach, day center, those types of programs that work with people in their crisis situations and helping to stabilize them. And then we also are holding another seat for a permanent housing provider. And those would include folks who work at supportive housing, rapid rehousing, other types of permanent housing programs. And we really ask that those folks be individuals with some leadership in their organization, and that will help align within our current Blueprint Council structure so that all of those folks are working together towards our common goals in our community plan. I want to also say that it is intentional for us to have representation from all parts of our continuum of services. So we appreciate nominations for crisis response provider and permanent housing provider both. Eligibility for who's electable is on the CoC website. And again, I'll share that link when I'm done speaking. And the nominations committee wanted to make sure that we were sharing that the committee and the Blueprint Council is committed to diversity. And so one of the steps that we have taken in our nominations process and in our elections process is to support the election of diverse candidates. And we have established policies within our election procedure that will encourage and ensure that we have diversity in our process. So please, and not only consider nominating yourself or a friend, but please think of those leaders in our community who are people, BIPOC individuals, people of color. And we would love to have that representation continue on our board so that we are reflective of the community that we serve. Quick update on our timeline and where we are in the process so that everyone knows kind of what's coming next. We have these nominations closing here in just a few hours. So again, don't forget to nominate someone if you'd like to. The nominations committee will review the nominees and verify their eligibility. We also ask anyone who's nominated, we ask them to confirm that they do accept the nomination so that we don't put anybody on the ballot who's not comfortable actually being elected to a seat. And so we'll do that over the next couple of days after we close our nominations process. We'll then develop our ballot for the Blueprint Council election in the coming week and get that posted and available to people for our election to open at noon on December 7th. Excuse me, December 23rd, November 23rd, which will remain open until December 7th. We're going to have primarily voting happening online through our SurveyMonkey platform. And it's very similar to what we've done in past years, those of you who are familiar. We also have paper ballots available that folks can print off at our website. And those paper ballots, we're asking folks to submit them by noon on December 7th. We will continue to collect the electronic votes until 5 p.m. that day, but the intention is by having those ballots in hand at noon on the 5th or on the 7th, we'll ensure that we have those individual ballots that folks were wanting to submit in time for the close of the election. So there's no confusion about whether or not somebody's paper ballot was received. We are asking folks to drop off ballots on certain days, and those days are listed on this slide. All of this information will be provided on a copy of the paper ballot. So the paper ballot will have full instructions on how to submit those ballots. And I know in the past, we've had folks who do street outreach or have outreach events will print ballots and make them available to folks who come to their event who have lived experience or are currently experiencing homelessness. And you're welcome to do that again, submitting those ballots in accordance with the process that's outlined on the ballot form. So very similar to past years, and we encourage folks of all membership within the continuum to vote in the election. The candidates will be notified, and then we will announce the results of the election sometime between December 8th and the 17th. We're giving ourselves just some time to make sure that we are able to verify all of those votes, count them correctly, and work with the nominating committee to have them certify the results of the election and have that announcement made before Christmas. So if you are still kind of thinking about whether or not you'd like to be a candidate for our Blueprint Council, please consider nominating yourself or a friend today. Like I said, the nominations close at 5 p.m. And we encourage any individual with lived experience or direct service providers to submit their names for nomination. Thank you so much. Any questions? Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amy Gibson.
Thanks, Rachel. So just a quick update on the Homeless Persons Memorial Service. This will be an in-person event this year. However, it will be outdoors. So make sure that you dress for the weather for that. It will take place on Tuesday, December the 21st at 11 o'clock to noon. So it'll be about an hour. It might be a few minutes over an hour. And it will be on the north side of Monument Circle. Could you go to the next slide, please? Right. All right, so just again, it will be outdoors, so dress for the weather. This will be standing for the most part. However, we will have seating available for those who cannot stand for the amount of time. So just keep that in mind as well. We are working in partnership with Christ Church Cathedral and Roberts Park United Methodist Church for this year's service. So both will be taking part in the actual service that day with different roles. So please continue to submit names of those who have passed so we can ensure that we remember them during the service. This includes anyone who passed since December 19th, 2020, which was the cutoff date for last year. So this year's cutoff is December 13th. So it's a little quicker, I guess, than the last year. We went right up to the day, which was difficult to make sure that we had everything printed and things like that. So December 13th is the cutoff. If someone passes after that date, they will be remembered in the 2022 service. So one more thing, lunch will be provided for those experiencing homelessness. So a big thank you to Luminati's Pizza for providing individual sized pizzas for those individuals experiencing homelessness. These are individual, as I said, so it will be a quick just pick up and leave. We won't have a seated area as we have in the prior years. And then could you go to the next slide, please? So unfortunately, we've lost many individuals this year, which increases the need for volunteers. So currently, I need approximately 100 additional folks to hold candles this year. So it's a lot. Please email me if you are available to volunteer, and we can get you set up. I can provide more details at that point. So please, again, we definitely need volunteers. So please email me if you are available. And with that, I will hand it back to Rachel to talk about the 2022 point in time count.
You're on mute, Rachel.
Thank you. I will just say I appreciate everybody on the committee's support with the point in time count this year. I'm going to be going on maternity leave shortly, and my colleague Amy Gibson, I'll be handing this off to her while I'm gone. But I did just want to provide everybody with the information and updates that we do have about the point in time count right now. And the first is that our point in time count has been scheduled. It will take place from January 24th to the 28th of 2022. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the point in time count, let me tell you a little bit more about what exactly it is and why we do it. The point in time count is really a single night census of all individuals who are experiencing homelessness. That includes folks who are in our shelters, transitional housing, safe havens, programs, or in any unsheltered location. And those individuals, we count on that single night. So that night will be on January 24th, but we will continue to count folks, asking them where were they experiencing homelessness on the night of January 24th, from the 24th to the 28th. It's a little bit different than we've done it in the past, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and why we are doing it that way. The count has to occur in the last 10 days of January. This is a requirement of the Housing and Urban Development Department that we submit this report to every year. And it's a requirement that we do it at the end of January as a part of being a continuum of care and receiving federal dollars. We really work in collaboration with our friends at the Professional Blended Street Outreach team and folks who are at the Public Policy Institute as our research partner. We have wonderful volunteers that come out and support the point in time count every year. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get involved if you're interested. And we really work as a team to get this point in time count done every year. Many of you may recall, nights where we've gone out and it's been bitterly cold, lots of different experiences. But this year with our point in time count, we are wanting to be have precautions with COVID-19. One of those main precautions is that our colleagues at Professional Blended Street Outreach team are going to be working with us to do their street outreach and to engage out in the community to help us count folks, but that we're not going to be deploying volunteers with those PBSO members as a part of helping people stay COVID safe and keep COVID distance. We're having those teams go out separately. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that's one of the most important things that we're doing. Additionally, we're continuing to utilize a shortened survey format so that the interactions that we're having with individuals are as short and succinct as possible to limit exposure between people who are experiencing homelessness and any of our volunteer or any of our PBSO or volunteers that are going out into the community. Every year we do report all of this information to HUD, to Housing and Urban Development. And if you're at all interested in going and seeing our previous reports, our dashboards and other things that we report every year, I will be posting this link to the Continuum of Care dashboard for the point in time count in the chat. And it's really, interesting information. The PIT count is really just one data point that we use in speaking about homelessness. It is a single night census of folks. So we know that's not the entire picture of homelessness in our community, but it is a helpful marker for us to assess kind of where we are as a checkpoint every year. And it's something that, we always put our report and our dashboards out about every year as well. So I'll be posting that link for you to visit in just a moment, and you can learn more if you're interested. So last year we did use this multi-day count approach, and we really saw in our report that we produced last year, one of our conclusions was that this was something we should do again, because we had really marked differences in what we found. Obviously, when individuals are only encountered on a single night, we may miss people if people aren't there at their encampment that day, or if they happen to be, not somewhere where they usually are. We may miss them. So we're looking forward to using this methodology again with a multi-day count, so that our street outreach workers and our volunteers can locate folks, as best as possible. Our goal with the point in time count every year is that it's accurate. So while folks out in the community or the news media may focus on numbers increasing or decreasing, it's really our responsibility to make sure the number is accurate, because we want to know and we want to make sure that we are telling part of the story of what's going on with homelessness in Indianapolis, and that it's an accurate picture. Like I said previously, folks will be asked specifically about where they were on the night of the count on January 24th, 2022, and street outreach will be out daily from that Monday to Friday to assist folks engaging in their surveys out in their encampments and in their street outreach work, similar to what they did last year, which we're so grateful for their help and support in doing that. We are wanting to deploy some community volunteers though, because there was obviously some things, because PBSO is busy and they have lots of work to do. There are maybe some opportunities for us to engage people in some of our site bases where folks may be spending time, and we are going to use community volunteers to do that. So libraries, some of our day centers, drop-in centers that exist out in the community, any of our community meals. In past years, we had volunteers go to, for example, the Poorhouse event on Wednesday evening, or the Thursday event, the Thursday breakfast meal that's at Cathedral Kitchen. And those are the kinds of things where we'd like to deploy volunteers to again this year. And we're really looking for input from folks in the community right now on where we should go. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but we really want to make sure we're identifying the best places for us to locate folks so that we can support that street outreach effort to count people too. If you are able to, please shoot us an email if you have thoughts on where we could send volunteers. I had a wonderful conversation with some folks at the library last week, so we've got some great ideas about the library branches and where we might send some of our volunteer teams during the week. But if you know of community meals that are well attended by folks experiencing homelessness, or maybe a faith-based or a very small drop-ins type of center who we may not typically engage with, please let us know. We'd love to know, when those locations are open so we can connect with them and see if we might be able to send a volunteer team in there. We would obviously be working very closely with any of those partners who run those sites or those meals in order to make sure we're coming and they expect us. So we want to make sure we're giving ourselves plenty of time to plan for that. We're going to be taking suggestions until around December 1st, when we're going to start firming up our plans and working with those partners to get those individuals counted at those locations. If you would like to serve as a point in time count volunteer and go out and survey in the community, we would love to have your participation. All volunteers do receive training, and they will be trained in January. The week prior to the count, we'll host some sessions that people can attend and go over what the process of the point in time count is, the survey, how to perform the survey correctly, things like that. And we'll also be sending materials out with teams so that they're prepared to provide and do those surveys out in the community. Just as an FYI, if you are a shelter, you may remember that we do the point in time count every year, but we typically utilize the homeless management information system for that, and we're doing that again this year. So this is just a quick note to you all. We're not forgetting about you. We're definitely going to be connecting with you in your agency as we approach the PIT count in January. Our team lead from the homeless management information system, Gwen Beebe, is going to be the lead for the point in time count sheltered count. So she'll be connecting with you and your team in the coming weeks and months to make sure that everybody's aware that the point in time count's happening and any special data instructions that they need to provide to you about how you can correctly report your numbers for the night of the count. Finally, I just want to also let folks know, because this is something that you may or may not be as familiar with, the point in time count planning team not only connects with all of the shelters, both those that use the homeless management information system and those that don't, but we also connect with the school liaisons that serve students all across Marion County. We're not required to report those students or their families as a part of our point in time count to the federal government, but we do here in Indianapolis really prioritize understanding what the homeless experience is like for families and children in our community. And so we do work with those liaisons to connect with those school districts and make sure that we are learning about those children who are experiencing homelessness and making that a part of our community report. So we report that directly back to our continuum of care, our community, to share that information about that part of the story. Even though it's not a federal requirement, it's something that we value and really hold in high esteem here in Indianapolis. And then because I will be on leave, my colleague Amy Gibson is the point of contact for the point in time count. So if you have any questions about the PIT count, please do connect with Amy. There will be information, like I said, I'll post in the chat too, so you can, post send an email to the info account if you'd like to share information with us about where you can have volunteer sites, where we can set up those volunteer sites. But Amy will be our lead while I'm out on leave. So I appreciate Amy's help, and she's been wonderful support so far. So she'll do a great job in getting us through the rest of the PIT count process. Do we have any questions about the PIT count? Okay, I'll go ahead and post that link here in just a second. And I want to briefly update everybody on the winter contingency plan and the information that's currently on the CoC website. For those of you who are less familiar with the homeless response system, every year we have what is called the winter contingency plan. That is a plan for individuals who are experiencing homelessness that is active from November 1st until March 31st. And it's a special shelter process and capacity increase that we do during the winter to try and offer folks as many options for sheltering as we can in those coldest months of the year. If you haven't had a chance to look yet, the Indy CoC website is where we keep a copy of that plan, and we ask that folks, continually and regularly look at that because it is updated throughout the season. We do try and send out email reminders if something changes, but often, we have situations that arise that are weather dependent, or we have new capacity that is coming on board that we want to report to the community so people are aware. and you can find a copy of that plan on the CoC website. If you are someone who has engaged with the plan previously, but maybe you are trying to engage folks who are new to the process, we do have this year a quick process map that's on the website as well that you can use to help maybe train a colleague who doesn't really interact with the system as frequently, and make that available to them. And that information is also on the CoC website. Just to be clear, there are special circumstances that we have every year. Well, not every year. We have planned for every year, but we don't activate every year. The city of Indianapolis may choose to activate the extreme temperature plan in declared emergency weather nights only. And that's when we really reach the most extreme temperatures of the whole year. In the past, we haven't typically engaged this plan, but we did actually have to use it this last year. So if you have questions or concerns about that, please reach out to us, but we are preparing for what may arise this year, as we do every year, and making sure that we have additional sheltering capacity to meet the need if it were to happen, that we activate that really extreme temperature plan, working in partnership with the city to do that. Yes, thank you for asking a question, Lindsay. I'm going to defer to my colleague Andrew Merkley at the city to speak about anything related to the additional family space. I encourage folks who are interested in that information to attend the Thursday morning calls, because I believe they'll be able to provide a more real-time update about when that space will be opening. I know that they're making progress, and the hope is that that will be available in December for additional family winter contingency space. So I know that they'll continue to provide those updates on Thursday morning calls that are hosted by the Continuum. If you need an invitation to that, please email the information at IndyCoC page and we'll get you connected. But we'll also update the winter contingency plan and send out an email to everybody as soon as we have that updated information and that it's live and active, that we're able to utilize that extra shelter space that we're planning for to be available in December. And again, because I'm going to be out on maternity leave, my colleague Matt Holland is going to be the contact while I'm gone for winter contingency and extreme temperature plan. So please do reach out to him if, as we move into December, you have any questions. And you can always email the information at IndyCoC account and get connected to somebody at CHIP for any question that you have about whether it's winter contingency or just anything related to the Continuum. And we'll get that routed to the correct person. All right, now I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague, Natalie from the city of Indianapolis, and she's gonna help, we're gonna kind of tag team a little bit about the HUD Continuum of Care NOFO application. Were there any questions about winter contingency before we move forward? And thanks for that question, Lindsay. I know it's on everybody's mind. Okay. All right, Natalie, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. For everybody who doesn't know me.
Pause for a minute.
Oh,
I think Andrew was speaking, but Andrew, we don't have audio on you.
Oh, sorry, I can't see anybody's screen. So if he was, I apologize.
I don't think your audio is working, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, it's grayed out. You're right. Maybe we can set this up.
And if you're able to maybe jump in chat and we can try to come back around too. If you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, that might be a good idea. Thanks, Andrew. Sorry about that. Thanks for flagging that. Oh, yeah, he is trying to talk. You're right. Well, let's move forward, and then I'll try and get Andrew on while we're going through the continuum of care application. Is that okay? Yeah, I know how I can chat him.
Alrighty. Well, hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Natalie Roberts. I am the Continuum of Care Grant Manager for the City of Indianapolis. Before we get started with our little section, I did want to go ahead and thank everyone who was a part of this process. It really does take the whole NDCOC. So if we came to your work group, if you were a part of the non-conflicted work group, or if you were part of the provider work group, if you've read through the application, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a long process, but we made it, we did it, and I couldn't be more grateful. So a little bit about what the Continuum of Care program is. It's the largest single source of permanent housing funding in Indianapolis. So that's usually through permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. Currently, we receive about $7.2 million in Continuum of Care funding and $3.8 million in Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, or YHDP funding. And that $3.8 million was over a 2-year time period. We were awarded the YHDP grant in 2019. So our funding not only goes towards rental assistance for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, but also to help with services for those 2 areas as well. The NDCOC submitted our application was submitted on Saturday, November 13th, yay. And we submitted for $9.9 million for the funding starting in 2022. And that's for all of our total projects. So that includes renewal projects, the projects we've been using in the past that were renewed this year, the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, which will start rolling into our CoC funding in 2022, the planning grant, which we use and we apply for yearly, of course, the new projects, and we apply for some projects through the domestic violence bonus. And our Continuum of Care had more than $835,000 available to new projects. So a lot available, and we did fund some great new projects, which I'll kind of go over to Rachel to explain those.
So we were able to fund wonderful new projects this year, which we're so excited about. Every year is a little bit different in the HUD Continuum of Care application in what funding is available to us to apply for. So it's really exciting that we were able to apply for new projects in these various different areas to support not only permanent supportive housing, but hopefully some additional rapid rehousing capacity as well. The new projects we applied for under supportive housing, which is the ongoing rental subsidy and services, are Horizon House projects for single adults and families, and the new Lutheran Child and Family Services Pando projects for youth and young adults. So some of you may be familiar with the Pando project. It began this last year, and we were able to have the Pando project submit for capacity to build services onto their partnership with the Indianapolis Housing Agency to provide the vouchers that they're using there at the site. So the Horizon House project is a what's called a scattered site project, and that means that they'll be renting units out in the community. And we're really excited for this new supportive housing for single adults and families. We have not had new supportive housing funded through the Continuum of Care project in a couple of years. So we're excited to hopefully get this added to our portfolio, and we feel really good about the application we submitted and these new projects for supportive housing. We also applied for new rapid rehousing from the Damien Center and from Coburn Place. Coburn Place is expanding existing projects that they have with additional capacity, and Damien Center submitted a new project of rapid rehousing. And that rapid rehousing is a time-based subsidy and services where folks will engage with case management and have rental subsidy on an up to 2-year basis. So it's a wonderful opportunity we have to build this capacity for supportive housing and rapid rehousing in our community. And we're excited and optimistic about our chances of getting some new projects added to the Continuum of Care program in our renewable funding. Finally, we did submit an application for building more capacity for our homeless management information system. There has been a great deal of expansion for HMIS and need in the community. And we're excited to have this opportunity to have new capacity to support new projects that have been coming on board through the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, through the domestic violence bonus funding we received in the last couple of years, and a lot of the new emergency solutions grant funding that we got through the CARES Act, and additional resources that are starting to come into our system through the American Rescue Plan. trying to really make sure that all of those are represented on our database so that we're able to really see and track those outcomes and make sure our system is connected and referrals happen smoothly, things like that our HMIS system really allows us to do. So really wonderful that we had the opportunity to include all 3 types of these projects in our application this year. And hopefully we will hear that we received some or all of this funding coming up soon. So I'll pass it back over to Natalie to talk more about what our timeline for knowing more about what's coming next might be.
Yeah, so as Rachel was saying, if you've ever worked with a NOFO or a NOFA, the Notice of Funding Opportunity and the Notice of Funding Availability, so this application in the past, it's usually earlier in the year. So this year was a little bit later. We're hoping, and we're putting it out there, that we'll get some type of funding announcement in March of 2022 for these new projects and the renewal projects, though it could be later. So we put out that we hope it's March 22, but we're planning for later if need be. And depending on when we hear back from HUD about whether we've received the funding or not for these projects, the funding wouldn't be available until around September 2022, but the city and CHIP are committed to working with these new projects to get them started, to get them acclimated, and how our systems and processes work as they join our continuum of care. So like I said, hopefully we'll hear March 2022, but we'll keep everyone updated as we learn more from HUD.
And there's your lovely face.
So yeah, if you have any questions about CoC grants or funding, please contact me. There's my contact information. I'm also on the Thursday morning calls. You'll see me around as well. And then as we're moving into the next year, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or this application, will come soon. It always comes sooner rather than later. It feels like no time at all. So just be prepared as we're moving into this new year and thinking about next year's application. There may be some things out there for everyone to participate in as we move along.
Yeah, I will just share that I was a recipient of an email yesterday already talking about how we're going to start planning for next year from Alicia Vaughn. So there is no rest for us in the world of Continuum of Care grant funding. Because we know how important this funding is to the community. So it's wonderful to see the ongoing commitment of everybody who's involved, though. And as Natalie said, we really just appreciate everybody's time who's been involved, whether you're a service provider receiving funding who gave input into our process, or that in any of the work groups that assisted us in putting the application together. It was truly a team effort and a community-wide effort. So thank you all so much for that.
Absolutely. And I forgot to mention as well, if you'd like to read the application or look at the priority listing, I will put the link to that information in the chat.
Yeah, if you happen to have some spare time to read, 70 or 100 pages, I can't even remember how long it is, but it's great stuff. All right, we're going to turn it over to Danielle. I believe Andrew's working on trying to be available to get on. He's just taking him he's having a little bit of trouble with his Zoom. So I'm chatting with him and he's just trying to figure out how he can get his audio to work. So hopefully we'll be able to circle back. We can circle back before the end of the meeting to have him answer any further questions about winter contingency.
All right, good morning, everybody. We can go to the next slide, Rachel. I'm going to kind of just start giving a little bit of a recap of where we were the last time that we met in the last CoC convening, which was back in July, to kind of refresh everyone's memory. There's been a lot that has been happening in the CoC world when it comes to rehousing this year. So I wanted to spend some time kind of recapping where we were. So in July, we had just finished a round of HUD technical assistance that was really focused on our non-congregate shelters and our rehousing efforts. So I know there's a lot of acronyms on that list, but I will do my best to translate them as I go. So we had just finished that technical assistance, and really through that technical assistance, we launched a core rehousing team that was focused at the non-congregate shelter, which was at the Crown Plaza at that time. Also around the same time in July, we were really starting to look at implementing our 2020 vouchers. So we have two different kinds of vouchers available to our system. One is emergency housing vouchers, And then one is the Section 8 housing choice vouchers with a homeless preference. So we have several different vouchers available to us right now. And the graph on the bottom was kind of our pathways. And so when we left off in July, we were just starting to make some movement with our rapid rehousing and PSH move on, our ESG CV bridge. So folks that were housed in emergency solutions grants, COVID rapid rehousing programs that needed to be bridged over to a voucher. We were just starting to make some progress with that. And then as well for navigation only. So these are folks with a lower service need, really targeted to folks primarily in shelter who really just need that long-term subsidy in order to and help with housing navigation, finding a unit in order to overcome homelessness. And then we had a couple that were still kind of in the planning phases, or things that weren't really started yet. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit longer of kind of the progress that we've made in these different pathways. But that's kind of where we left off in July. We can go to the next slide. So really one big monumental thing that happened since our last meeting was that the Crown Plaza non-congregate shelter closed on September 30th. This was something that we anticipated. It had actually been extended numerous times. And so I think we were kind of all ready in a sense for it to close, because this kind of signified kind of a closing of a chapter and kind of an entry into a new kind of a process. So we had really used the time at the non-congregate plaza or Crown Plaza to really, revamp our rehousing team. What does that look like? How do we do more of a system approach to housing so that we're not just focused on, my program, my organization? Instead, it was a really much more concerted effort with numerous different agencies across the CoC. So I wanted to spend some time really celebrating the success of our non-congregate shelter, because a lot happened. It first opened in May of 2020 and closed September 30th of 2021. And throughout that time, 599 individuals were served, which is a phenomenal amount. Most of the folks that were there were high risk for COVID, either because of age or due to health condition. So this was really integral in our crisis response, our pandemic response, to ensure that people had a safe place to shelter during the pandemic. Interestingly enough, the day that we had the most people on site was July 15th of 2021, which was actually the last day that we started bringing people into the non-congregate, because we knew it was going to close in September and we needed time to house them. So July 15th is when we had the highest census, and we had 183 individuals that were on site on that specific day. So from July 15th to September, it was just grinding, getting people housed, connecting them to units in PAD mission, working on any kind of housing navigation needs that they had. When September 30th came, we still had 81 individuals that were on site. So we were not able to permanently house everybody in time for the September 30th closure. Only 28 of those individuals were high risk for COVID. So a lot of the other folks that were in were newer folks that had come in that weren't necessarily there because they were high risk for COVID, but really were there because they needed a safe place to shelter. So the 81 individuals, we didn't kick them out. We didn't send them back to the street or back to congregate shelter. We worked with the city, and they were able to secure another hotel that all of those 81 individuals were able to move to. That has now become our winter contingency hotel. All of those 81 individuals are also still in the pipeline to be housed. Several of them have been housed since then. We're continuing to work on housing the folks. Some of it was just a matter of waiting for units to be available for them to move in, but we're continuing to work on housing all of those individuals. Over the course of the non-congregate, we had 240 permanent housing placements, which is really fantastic. And 52% of those permanent housing placements were for households that are Black or African American, which is really great from an equity lens. We want to ensure that that we have, housing placements are representative of the population that we serve. We can go to the next slide. So this is a specific dashboard that we still use. We update this every single day, which is still looking at our non-congregate hotels. So while the Crown closed, I mentioned that we kind of moved over into this winter contingency hotel. We also have the folks remaining of that 81 that moved over there. And then there's also another site that's the Wyndham that's being run by the health department. that continues to have some folks there, and we're continuing to work on housing all of those folks. So I think this was pulled a couple days ago, but we have about 114 people across those 2 sites working to get them enrolled in coordinate entry, get them referred to housing. Most of them have already been referred to housing. But this dashboard, I think, is really exciting, and there's a link that's in the slides. You can also find it on the CHIP Tableau public page. But it really helps us kind of celebrate our successes, to be able to see the census over time go down and to be able to see those housing placements go up. And you can really see the hard work that everyone has put in the last several months. It also helps us monitor documents that we've collected. So the kind of spiky bar at the bottom is the amount of documents that we've uploaded into HMIS. So these are things like IDs, birth certificates, income, which is exciting and has really been successful because of the document specialists that we've been able to secure throughout this pandemic. So now I'm going to kick it over to Greg, and you can go to the next slide, Rachel, to really talk about Home Now Indy as the demonstration. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about this after Greg's done around kind of what is Home Now and how is this outside of the context of ESG, CV, rapid rehousing. But I want Greg to kind of provide an update of the progress of Home Now Indy as it related in the last several months.
Good morning, everybody. Greg Stocking with Merchants Affordable Housing. I see some new faces in the attendee list. So I work for Merchants Affordable, but that's just where my paycheck comes from. I'm dedicating almost all my time to the Home Now Indy initiative. Merchants Affordable's role is to serve as the central fiscal entity for the funding, as well as the central housing acquisition team. We've also picked up a case management team that we supervise directly out of this office. And you guys have set a really high bar on the acronym challenge. I will do my best, but I might stumble. But next slide. I put my information in the chat. That's my email and cell. If you guys have questions after the presentation. So through Home Now, we have housed, as of this week, 283 households. Those have come from non-congregate sites as well as unsheltered individuals. Beyond that, we have 21 households that are approved at a unit. So they've submitted an application to a property. It's been reviewed. We're just waiting for a move-in to either be scheduled or to happen. Sometimes we run into processing delays with properties or just a unit being physically available, inspection items being completed. We have 30 households beyond that have submitted an application, and we've seen a pretty good success rate on applications being approved. And I think that's a credit to the housing acquisition team, Nancy Holland, Patrice Bay, and Kylie Bay, having those upfront negotiations with landlords, using the flexible incentives that we have to really find and identify where we can push that flexibility on screening criteria, rent amounts. And then beyond that, we have 71 households that are still searching. And the primary delay in that process is housing supply. It's really folks that need a lot of flexibility from landlords, especially around criminal history. And next slide. So where do we stand on funds committed? It's been a year, been a little over a year. And this chart kind of highlights the funds actually expended as well as the funds committed. And it's a mix of the federal funds, the Emergency Solutions Grant, CARES Act funding that we've received, as well as non-federal dollars. And it just kind of shows a breakdown of where the funding is really going, especially utilizing those flexible landlord incentives. The second line there is a really broad category, not just furniture, move-in kits, and moving expenses, but barriers to housing, utility arrears, eviction arrears, deposits. As a role for merchants being that central fiscal entity, we received the full CARES Act contract from the city and subcontracted out to service providers for services. And so we were a pass-through for this case management and housing navigation services. And down towards the bottom, you'll see actual dollars going towards rental assistance and funds committed to support the 12-month leases. Altogether, just over $6 million that we have either expended or project to expend through the rest of the contracts that we have. And next slide. So September 30th was a big deal for a lot of reasons. It was not just the closure of the Crown Plaza non-congregate shelter, but it was a big timeline for us in administration of the CARES Act funding. The CV2 funding that we have expires September 30th of 2022. So that was our kind of cutoff to guarantee 12-month leases. And we've had to have a big shift in who we're serving and how we can serve them, because we can't rely just on having 12 months of subsidy coming from the ESG CV2 contract. So in that shift, we're having to negotiate different criteria with landlords. Will they accept shorter term leases? Will they accept clients that we can bridge to a voucher? And we're really working closely with IHA on how we can partner in those voucher conversions. We always knew that 12 months of rapid rehousing assistance was not going to be enough for these households, and we would have to bridge them somewhere. So the voucher, not just the homeless preference vouchers, but the emergency housing vouchers provided by the American Rescue Plan have been a really great opportunity for us. And we've referred 191 households so far from our bridge list from rapid rehousing to a voucher, working closely with IHA staff. And it's been a good opportunity for us to, not only partner organization to organization, but reframe our pitch to landlords on the front end on selling them on this rehousing effort, funds that we have available, use of PAD mission as a tool, but also how we reframe the conversation around housing retention and ongoing landlord support. So it's really broken that connection that we had early on of home now is CV2, CV2 is home now. That was never the intent, but that's kind of where our safe spot was. That's where I think it was comfortable, and we had a lot of money to get out the door. But October, November has been a really great opportunity to kind of revisit the original intent of Home Now Indy and look beyond the ESG CV2 as a source. So we've pivoted our strategy, still working to find units with flexible screening criteria for those 71 households that need that flexibility, but also really being intentional around bringing Section 8 units into the fold and finding properties that don't currently accept Section 8 and working with them to get them more comfortable with working with IHA. Part of that is we've been able to get really creative with partners, blending flexible funding sources, being able to speak more confidently about what different programs and different agencies can bring to the table. And I just want to show appreciation to all the folks that I've had phone calls and emails with, not just service providers, but Michelle at HUD, our friends at the city, and really helping us understand the nuance of what can these dollars do, not just on their own, but in conjunction with other programs. And Angie Haas, who's in our team, we've been working with Lindsay Leonard, and this Thursday, we're going to roll out some really specific written guidance on what Home Now can do, especially around barrier busting funds, deposits, arrears, but what we can do to support clients that are receiving services and rental assistance from other programs in conjunction with our dollars as the kind of the flexible incentives and barrier busting funds. So on the Thursday community call, we'll roll out some written guidance in a payment request form on how we can kind of organize some of that incoming. But I think the last note on this slide was just a huge thanks to Matt Holland at CHIP and all the case managers that are working with Home Now clients. It was a huge lift to get everyone housed and then to pivot and work on rehousing them with a voucher, whether that means utilizing that voucher in their current unit or working with that client to find the next unit with a voucher. That's a huge lift. It's a lot of paperwork. It was a lot of new acronyms to throw at people. And so I just really appreciate Matt helping me with air traffic control on the referral and the coordination with Tiana and Shantae at IHA, but the case managers that are on the ground answering questions from clients and explaining what it is we're up to. Next slide. So events, I think we're getting more savvy in events. We did a Home Now Heroes event in July or August to kind of acknowledge the landlords that had worked with the Home Now Indy initiative. It was a good opportunity to meet people face to face. COVID had loosened enough to where we felt comfortable bringing people together. And it was an opportunity not just to get existing landlords in, but prospective landlords, people that we'd been talking to but hadn't yet sold, or people that we had worked with a couple clients, but we really wanted to expand that relationship. But it was a good chance to highlight landlords that jumped in with us early and were, some of those early adopters, properties that have given us the most flexible criteria, and not just acknowledging them, but giving them a space to share with their peers on how they made those decisions and how that experience has been working with our clients. But also highlighting those that have worked with us at scale, like who has really given us blocks of units, who is calling us ahead of time when they have planned vacancies, so we can start queuing up the next move in. So the audience was about 70 landlords, Home Now Indy staff, and other industry folks. They came together to hear an industry forecast from George Tikkajon, and a state of homelessness from Rodney Stockman at the city. And Jay Beatty was also there to speak to the eviction moratorium, which was very much a huge topic at that time. But it was good, I think, to get the service provider staff and Home Now Indy staff together in a room with landlords and share some client successes and kind of show what it is we're doing, what we're looking for out of a landlord partner, and how we want to deepen those relationships. So in that spirit, we are now planning, in partnership with IHA and the Marion County Reentry Coalition, some more traditional landlord fairs, both education opportunities to get properties up to speed on what resources are available, what we can provide as Home Now, what rental assistance is out there, and really where the need is, specifically around bedroom size, approvable rents, flexible criteria. So I look forward to getting some more information out. I'm not sure if Chris Walsh is on the call, but him and I are planning an event in early December, and we'll provide updates on the Thursday morning calls. But to find more information, we can advance to the next slide. We are on social media, so I encourage you to engage with us there, share posts. We try to share client success stories, like you see on that sign down in the bottom left. That the top left there is a snapshot of some of the team that had been working out at the Crown at the non-congregate shelter. And then just in general, updates like you see there, the move-in kits, things that we are also providing beyond just basic case management and rental assistance. So there are all of the links and handles, and that's also where we will post some open positions. We're growing a bit, and there's 2 vacancies that I'd like to announce while I've got a minute. We're looking for a program coordinator to help with that fiscal entity scope, to help keep claims moving, process incoming payment requests, make sure all the numbers are adding up in our claims to the city, and just provide general program grant administration help with the funding. And we also have a vacant director of services here at Merchants. Part-time, they help Home Now Indy by supervising our case management team, but they also have a scope outside of Home Now for kind of leading and directing service coordination at Merchants properties. But keep a lookout there for updates. If anyone has any questions, please email me. I've also put my cell phone there in the chat. Happy to answer questions. And I think I'm handing back over to Danielle.
All right, so that is a good segue right into our voucher deployment. I know Greg mentioned bridging a lot of folks from rapid rehousing over to vouchers. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to provide a little bit of an update on kind of where we're at now. So this is kind of that same slide that we saw at the beginning, but updated to our current status. So we've made a lot of progress. We've made a lot of referrals to vouchers. We have a lot of folks that have vouchers in hand right now that are looking for units. And so our different pathways, PSH restructuring, we're looking, there's Natalie Roberts from the city is working with our PSH providers on what that might look like to move some folks over to vouchers to free up some money that could be moved over from rental assistance to supportive services. So that is still kind of being planned right now. We haven't made any official referrals under that pathway yet. When it comes to rapid rehousing and PSH move on, we've made 158 referrals to vouchers for folks that are currently in rapid rehousing or PSH and need a longer term subsidy, but no longer have that supportive services need. For folks that we housed in our ESG CV rapid rehousing programs, we've made 203 referrals over to vouchers for those folks. PSH for chronic and unsheltered, we're still looking at services. We obviously have to have services if we're going to use a voucher as PSH. And so still looking at services funding and services mapping that's available in our community and funding that will be available next year. Navigation only, so again, primarily folks that are in shelter that need help with that navigation piece, need help finding a unit, and need that longer term subsidy. We've made 348 referrals, so a lot of activity from that pathway. And then the DOC reentry demonstration. So this just got kicked off about a week or two ago for folks that are being released from the Department of Corrections into homelessness as a reentry demonstration specifically for the emergency housing voucher. So we've made 5 referrals through that pathway. So a lot of people in process. And if you go to the next slide, we have another dashboard that we're using to really track our voucher deployment. This is also found on our Tableau Public. And Matt, I'm not sure if you could throw the link into the chat for that. But this is updated at least once a week, typically every single day, which really looks at our different vouchers. And this is specifically for our voucher deployment, just specifically for 2021. So we've made 714 referrals to vouchers. You can click on if you want to just look at data versus for the emergency housing vouchers versus the homeless preference voucher. You can also look by specific pathway. And if you hover over the numbers there, it's going to show you kind of the average length of time it's taking for that step. So you can see right now, it's taking an average of 51 days for folks once they receive their voucher to submit the RTA saying that they found a unit. So that is the largest step right now, is that housing search and placement. So actually locating a unit, which is typically the longest point of this process. It always takes a long time to find units. But you can hover over this dashboard as well, and it will give you more specific data. It'll give you some demographics based on race. It'll also tell you how many people are currently on that step and so forth. So this is a really cool dashboard that we use every Thursday. We look at it together. We use this to help kind of plan our pathway. I think we still have about 200 people that have been referred to a voucher that have not yet gone to a briefing. So we're continuing to work with IHA to make sure people can get their voucher and then support them once they have a voucher to find a unit. And then I'm going to kind of kick it back over to Greg to kind of talk about our voucher deployment as a system, kind of some successes and what our current focus is for vouchers.
Yeah, so we meet weekly. I represent the CoC for the emergency housing voucher process. We meet weekly with IHA staff, and we've seen a huge jump in referrals here lately, especially in the last month. So we've referred 157 households to the EHV, which is 77% of the total EHVs available. That said, we're really hoping to see a high success rate with the vouchers. Typically, Section 8 programs, even outside of CoC programs, the industry average is probably around 70%, but we have some resources and some partnerships to hopefully really meet or beat that success rate. Beyond 157 referrals to the emergency housing voucher, which is the more flexible, newer voucher in the community, we've also made 568 referrals to the homeless preference voucher. So those are more traditional housing choice vouchers that IHA has made available to the CoC, giving a preference to our clients referred from coordinated entry above a more traditional waiting list. So 2 vouchers in the community, huge resources, especially for long-term housing stability. We hosted an event with IHA on November 3rd to really catch up on providing briefings to those referrals. So we were seeing a lot of referrals being made, and there's a really critical step for both the housing authority and the clients in getting a voucher in hand. So that's taking that referral, going through application eligibility, making sure that they're dotting I's and crossing T's for HUD eligibility, but also having conversations with that household on what the voucher is, how to be successful with the voucher, the rights and the obligations that they have with the subsidy. So we issued 145 vouchers in one day, which is huge. We had a lot of folks there. It was at the Athenaeum, 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And it was a huge interagency effort. IHA staff, CoC staff, CHIP staff, Home Now Indy. That was everyone from case managers and the community getting the word out about the event, identifying what barriers families might have, and getting to the event from transportation, childcare, but also staff on site, not just to process the work, but to identify and address issues as they come up. So that way, a family coming in, even if there were some needed items or maybe some stumbles along the way, we had all the right people there from the different agencies to push and make sure that they were able to get their voucher that day. One of the things that's really exciting about the emergency housing vouchers, HUD was pretty clever. I think they took some of the flexibility and creativity that we were provided through the CARES Act with our rapid rehousing, and they applied that same level of creativity and flexibility to these emergency housing vouchers. So there's a lot of waivers in the regs and built-in flexibility to help our clients be successful with the vouchers, including more funding for housing authorities around housing search and placement and flexible funding. So IHA's staffed up. They've got some new staff really focused on contacting those EHB referrals, walking them through that housing search and placement process. And again, we meet on a weekly basis to, measure progress, but also flag where challenges are coming up and where we might be able to pivot and address things. So current focus is now on landlord engagement. I think Chelsea had said in the chat, getting 145 vouchers out in a day doesn't guarantee 145 lease ups. So then the next huge push is to get landlords to the table. We've got the referral pipeline going. We need landlords to partner with. So we're utilizing all of our lists, connecting not just with the properties that IHA has historically worked with, but also the landlords that Home Now and the CoC have relationships with, really focused around unit acquisition for properties that will accept Section 8, and trying to find where Home Now can bring flexible funding in to pair with the flexible funding that IHA has around barrier busting, risk mitigation, and landlord incentives. A huge piece that we're continuing to work on is client education around Section 8. It's a lot, just even going through a briefing, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of things that you sign, there's risks and an opportunity with a voucher. And so really making sure that clients know the full range of what the voucher can do for them, but also what their obligations are to the voucher during that housing search process, as well as their ongoing tenancy, because we don't want to just move people in. We want to move people in a way that is going to be stable and that they're going to be able to fill out the term of their voucher. And just a couple examples of where we found creative uses for the funding. We've been able to knock out PHA debt and utility arrears as a barrier to clients engaging with the Section 8 voucher, which has, I know, typically been sometimes a dead end, but we've been able to flag it as an issue and identify the funding and get a process in place.
All right, next slide. So seeing as how we're getting really close to the end of the year, which feels really wild, I wanted to kind of give a little sneak peek of kind of our system as a whole when it comes to housing placements this year. And I know everyone's worked really hard this year. We've had some really amazing new resources come to the table. And so I wanted to put together a little sneak peek of kind of where we're at as a system. So if you go to the next slide, I want to celebrate all of the work that we've done this year. And so when we look at our coordinate entry system as a whole, typically, we house, it kind of depends. Last year was kind of a slow year because of the pandemic. But our busiest year yet of housing placements through coordinate entry was in 2019, where we housed 1,032 households, actually individuals. A lot of that was, in 2019, at the end of it, we had a voucher surge. So kind of a spike came at the end of the year, housing folks through homeless preference vouchers. Last year was definitely a little bit slower. We had 816 people housed through our coordinate entry system. But this year, where we're at currently is well exceeded any year yet, with 1,174 individuals housed through coordinate entry system. The lighter blue that's kind of towards the top represents housing placements through our Emergency Solutions Grant CV Rapid Rehousing. So, you know, having that resource, having those funds through the CARES Act really made a huge difference this year in our housing placements. 462 individuals have been housed specifically in ESG CV Rapid Rehousing. So I wanted to just spend some time. We still obviously have about 6 weeks, 7 weeks left of this year. So hopefully this number will surpass 1,200 by the end of the year, especially with all of the voucher folks that are in the pipeline right now. But I wanted to just take a minute to kind of celebrate this success, to be able to visually see all of our hard work in this little graph, and to celebrate our best year yet with our coordinate entry system and housing placements. Okay, next slide. I'm going to kind of give you a preview of what's to come, I think, beginning of next year or end of this year, really thinking about Home Now. And we talked about this a little bit in July, of really thinking of Home Now. It's not just ESG CV2. So ESG CV2 just came as kind of that demonstration. It let us get Home Now as a model kind of started. It helped us pilot some things, test out the model, see how things were going. And now's really a good time to kind of revamp that. So if we go to the next slide, kind of what we're working on right now is really defining roles a little bit more clear. So I know we've talked about this before, and we've demonstrated this through the rehousing, core rehousing team at the NCS, but really, you know, solidifying what is dedicated outreach? What is their role? Where do they start and where do they end? Where does system navigation come into play after dedicated outreach? You know, what does that handoff and that relationship look like with our housing acquisition team? And then where does case management and tenancy supports fall into that? So this is something that we're still working on solidifying. This is going to be the work of, I think, Q1 of next year. And then the last slide is really, you know, thinking about Home Now as our system. Like, what does it take to have an effective rehousing system? And all of these little blurbs here are all things that are necessary. So, you know, you have to have rent administration, you have to have grant management, you have to have dedicated housing centered outreach so that you're connecting folks that are unsheltered to housing. You have to have system navigation and be able to help folks find units, apply to units. That's going to play a really close role with our housing acquisition team and bringing on units for the system. Case management, tenancy supports for folks once they're housed is always going to be crucial. We've learned a lot this year around having dedicated specialists for documentation. SOAR is also in here, so connecting folks to SSI, SSDI, increasing their income. I know there's been some stuff in the chat around having a flexible funding pool. This is really integral, and I think we've realized through CV2, having all of the incentives that we have is really crucial and has helped us be successful this year. Not only that, when people move in, making sure that they have furniture and they have move-in support, that they have a move-in kit, that we're not just putting them in an empty apartment, but that they can really have a home when they move in. And then onboarding and training. I think we've brought a lot of new folks into the system this year. So many new faces, a lot of new people, and really how can we do a better job as a CoC of onboarding and training and providing some more consistency. So all of this really makes up Home Now Indy as a model. It's not just merchants, it's not just one grant, it's not one funding source. Merchants plays a piece of some of these bubbles, but the rest of the system fills in the rest of the bubbles, and there might still be some gaps. And so the work next year that we're really going to dive into is how do we take this, how do we make this bigger than just beyond CV2? How do we bring this to our entire system? How do we fill the gaps? Where can we pull more resources together to make this our model for rehousing? And that is all I have for rehousing. So I'm going to kick it back to Rachel.
Hi, I think we have resolved Andrew's audio problems, but before I toss it over to him, I just want to check and see if there was anybody who had anything for Danielle and Greg. Okay. I'm going to turn off my screen share for a second since we're going to talk about winter contingency. It's a little easier to just do that as opposed to click all the way back to the presentation for everybody. Andrew, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful.
Heck yeah. So an update on winter contingency, the extended stay America, where we transferred the folks that were at the Crown Plaza over to the extended stay. That is transitioning to strictly a overflow shelter for men and couples. There are some single women still there, I believe, and we're working to house them. As far as women and families are concerned, we are continuing to work with Wheeler Mission and CHIP on transitioning School 68 into a overflow shelter for women and families. That is not solidified yet, but we do hope to have a solid plan in place for that location in December. And I will announce to the group whenever that is, whenever we can definitively say that we're using School 68 for that purpose. Until then, the CWC will be using all of the beds that are there until we get an additional overflow space available. If need be, we do have a variance in place for Central Christian Church. So if the extended stay America fills up, we will use Central Christian Church for men and couples.
Thank you, Andrew. Anything else before we switch over to our council conversation? I've been getting in touch with folks, and I don't know that I see Dr. Kane on right now, but I see Brianka. So I will keep seeing if we can connect with Dr. Kane too.
Before we get started and switch over, there was a lot of information just shared over the last 60 minutes. So it's probably a good time to just pause for a moment and see where there are questions, areas for clarification, just things that are maybe kind of swirling around in people's minds through all of that information being provided. So now's a good time to either come off mute if there are some questions or jump in chat. Okay, well, if not, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like we're actually ahead of schedule. Which may mean the full 2 hours is not needed and people get some time that you had already blocked off. So maybe time to take a walk or get some extra coffee or whatever sounds good. I think, Rachel, maybe it makes sense. Dr. Merritt, I do see that Dr. Merritt has joined, and maybe we can go ahead and get started with council conversations with Dr. Merritt. And before we do, I want to just kind of give a little context to the Blueprint Council and some of the appointed positions that are on the Blueprint Council. For a little background, the Blueprint Council is the CoC governing board. It's a body that is kind of authorized under the Continuum of Care Charter, and that charter was updated in 2019 to really kind of redefine the Blueprint Council and the role of the council and who is appointed to the council versus elected to the council. I think you all heard at the top of this call, there are 4 elected seats, and those elections are open right now, ending later today. The rest of the seats on the council, though, are appointed seats, and either appointed directly by position. So for example, the Indianapolis Housing Authority has an appointed position on the Blueprint Council because we know how vital it is to align the work of the CoC and the housing agency. The Department of Metropolitan Development has a specific seat called out on the Blueprint Council because we know, again, how vital it is to align with the vision of of the community plan and the Department of Metropolitan Development as the collaborative applicant. There are other than buckets of seats that have kind of been laid out to where there's some flexibility in the appointments. And both Dr. Kane and Dr. Merritt sit in seats under what's called system seat buckets. So there are 4 to 6 available Blueprint Council seats for other systems. And what that means is homelessness cannot be addressed in isolation. It cannot be only the homeless serving agencies and providers that are trying to really move the needle on ending homelessness. We have to align with other major systems in order to do this. Some of those systems may include the Veterans Administration, the Department of Education, the Department of Corrections, healthcare entities, right? We know all of these systems play into and can impact homelessness, as well as align to find solutions to homelessness and to direct resources. So with that context, again, Dr. Merritt and Dr. Kane have both been appointed to the Blueprint Council in system level seats. And they both represent vital systems around health and housing. I think all of us have known this for a long time. Some of us may have become more acutely aware of this last 18 months with COVID, but housing and healthcare are completely intersecting, right? Housing is healthcare. The best way for people to address their healthcare, to be healthier, is to be stably housed. Housing is a social determinant of health, right? So it's really vital that healthcare systems and housing systems align their work and really understand the impact of coming together. So as you can see here, Dr. Merritt is the Chief Health Equity Officer with the Indiana Family and Social Services Administration, or FSSA, as many people may know it. Again, FSSA has been a vital partner statewide in really elevating issues around housing and health and the intersection of housing and health. If you remember, in the summer of 2020, actually probably early spring, FSSA led the first opening of a non-congregate hotel and opened the first quarantine and isolation site for individuals and households experiencing homelessness that needed a safe place to quarantine during the pandemic. So they've provided a huge leadership role in addressing some of these big challenges around healthcare and housing. And again, it's vital that then we, as a continuum of care, make sure there's strategy alignment with FSSA, that we have resource alignment, and that we're all working under the same shared vision. So that's a little context. Why don't we open it up now to get to know Dr. Merritt a little bit, her role on the blueprint. And Brianka, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome, good to see you.
Yeah, always.
Well, let's start off with some easy questions, just a little get to know you. So you are from Indianapolis, or at least you're in Indianapolis. What is one of your favorite places to eat here in Indianapolis? What's one of your go-to spots?
Yeah, so I am not a native of Indy, but I've lived here long enough to develop a favorite. So I'd probably have to say Mimi Blue Meatballs. They have a lot of options, even if you're going on kind of like a non-meat diet situation. They have lots of good stuff. So the one off of Mass specifically, if I'm working downtown, that's a go-to place. So yeah, I'd say that's probably my favorite.
Awesome. Well, hope people can check it out. Let's talk a little bit about your favorite spot to visit and why. If you were going to go on a vacation, where would it be? What kind of spot is it? And why is that your go-to?
So go-to vacation spot, and probably to a lot of people it's going to sound super lame, but I love the DC area. There's always something to do. There's lots of free museums. I'm a history and policy nerd, so it's fun to just kind of walk around, see new exhibits. And yeah, it's kind of expensive to stay there. So honestly, like when I have work-related pre-COVID, like work-related trips, trying to stretch those out and really get some time to kind of explore a little bit. So I think for mental stimulation, and then, the transit's great. So that's probably one of my favorite places to visit, even though it is domestic and probably seems kind of basic. It's the nation's capital, but it's probably my favorite place to go.
That's awesome. Have you ever been during Cherry Blossom Festival?
I have not. It's on my bucket list of things.
Okay, I would definitely recommend it. It's so beautiful. So what is something that people would be surprised to know about you, Dr. Merritt? Something that maybe isn't widely known, obviously that you feel comfortable sharing with a wider audience, but something that people might be surprised to know about you.
One thing that I did share recently with folks that is different, and you wouldn't know this on Zoom, but I'm a pretty short person. I know Chelsea knows that. She's seen me before many times. But I actually did high jump. I had a brief high jump stint in track, I think my freshman year in high school. It earned me a variety of interesting nicknames that I won't repeat, but I was very mediocre at it, but I was just really interested. And then they kept encouraging me to try. Like, my coach was actually really supportive of it. So I did do high jump for a little bit. And if you don't know, high jump is an event that's intended for people who are pretty tall. So I was probably shorter than I am now, trying to jump over a large pole. So yeah, fun times.
That's pretty awesome. And I think very indicative of kind of who you are, right? Like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. Watch, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try, like, don't tell me that it should be for shorter people. Let's do it.
Yeah, for better, for worse,
awesome.
That is definitely how I operate. So yeah, great connection.
That's awesome. So now that we've kind of warmed you up a little bit, let's talk a little bit more about your role and the work that you've led in the community. And I do want to make sure people are aware a little bit of your journey. So if you could talk about your journey in working with the continuum of care, kind of connecting your work to homelessness and addressing homelessness, and maybe a little bit where you started and now where you are in terms of your role with FSSA.
Sure. So I first got acquainted with, I guess, the Indianapolis CoC, working at the Indiana University Public Policy Institute. There we're at the time, and still are, PPI is the organization that oversees and supports the research part of the PIT count. And so probably around 2016-ish, I think I started working a little more closely with the CoC as well as CHIP specifically, and a variety of other homeless surveying organizations to do a variety of different evaluation and research support roles for different projects that were going on across the city. So working with quite a few different entities, especially where CHIP could be kind of the convener of those spaces. So while I was at PPI, I created the Center for Research on Inclusion and Social Policy, which, as the name implies, is work kind of at the intersection of kind of social policy, social service provision, and equity. And so with that work, we were working in a variety of spaces, not just related to homelessness, but also in housing in general. And so really being able to focus on and support, just bringing more light to issues related to housing instability, student mobility in several cases, in addition to homelessness and kind of the complexities associated with those experiences, and doing it in a way that hopefully would lead to people viewing this as something that is an issue that can be addressed, even in small increments, that, it's not kind of this, it is a big problem and kind of a big heavy problem, but that there are pieces to it that we could tackle. So our role was really to kind of hopefully translate some of those trends into information that would be useful for, policymakers, local leaders, nonprofits, et cetera. So while I was there, so after leaving a PPI, I started my role at FSSA as a Chief Health Equity and EA Officer. And so it's kind of a nice transition into something that is using all of that knowledge and research and policy trends into actionably trying to address a lot of those issues. And so I came to the Blueprint Council through my role initially at the Public Policy Institute as kind of the research liaison and kind of background person in that group. And so it's fun to kind of wear those different hats and support the CoC and the Blueprint Council in those ways. So that is a little bit of my journey and how I got here.
Thanks, Bianca, or Dr. Merritt. I think it's really, again, you noted part of your role with the Public Policy Institute was really kind of looking at the trends over time, doing a lot of the analysis around the point in time count, and identifying, if anyone's read the point in time count report that comes out annually, what are some of the key takeaways that we as a continuum really need to be paying attention to when we look at the data. And so some of the work that Dr. Merritt and her team at the Public Policy Institute, really kind of led on are flagging the things that we have to pay attention to around. We see a growing population of, for example, seniors experiencing homelessness. We've got to pay attention when we look at demographics to changes in, what we're seeing around racial inequity and homelessness, or racial disparities in homelessness, an aging homeless population. And so it's been really vital to work with a research partner like that to say, we can't look at this data in isolation. We have to look at trends, and we have to look at what these trends tell us so that our system can start focusing on dismantling disparity and addressing what we see changing.
And I'll add to that too, that one of the benefits of kind of being a little deeper in the weeds in some of the CoC work was that we could insert homelessness across a variety of efforts that we were doing. So if we're doing, work on, families in Indianapolis and poverty, we knew enough about homelessness to be able to say, hey, this is a critical issue that needs to be addressed here. When we're doing work on the elderly and older adults in Indianapolis, we could say, hey, let's talk about kind of the angle between housing, homelessness among older adults, as well as, veteran homelessness, and being able to make those connections kind of across a variety of different spaces. A lot of work in, criminal justice, people who are formerly incarcerated, and being able to kind of speak to homelessness across a variety of different areas was also critical for the work of that team too.
Absolutely. And I also want to name some critical work that you did with the Continuum in 2018 and 19 around eviction prevention. Dr. Merritt and her team led a research and kind of evaluation report to look at what was happening in Indianapolis around evictions, what was happening around kind of that more upstream eviction prevention work, and what are some recommendations of where our system should be moving in order to start to address kind of that front end of homelessness. And I just want to name that report has really influenced and helped inform some of what we see happening right now in Indianapolis around eviction prevention. That report's been used by several township judges to understand what's happening in the townships and to start to craft some of the responses and strategies to try to reduce the kind of path of eviction to homelessness. And so that was really important research too. I think that's laid some really strong foundation for what we see happening right now in Indianapolis. And then let's talk a little bit about the issue of homelessness, Dr. Merritt, and why it's important to you. And again, the lens that you bring, particularly in your role right now with FSSA as Chief Health Equity Officer. Why do we have to address homelessness? Why is this important? And again, what is the lens that you see from a health perspective on why we have to bring this work together?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's really, I'm in a position now where we can exact change on policy. And by policy, I don't mean necessarily, federal policy. We can make recommendations and state, policy decisions we can too. But when it comes to what's happening internally, we can actually do the work to address people's needs in different ways. So for those of you who don't know, FSSA has 8 divisions. We oversee our Division of Family Resources, which is SNAP and TANF, our Division of Mental Health and Addiction, our Division of Aging, Disability and Rehabilitative Services, Medicaid. Indiana 211 is now officially housed under us as well. We also have I usually lose steam around 6, early learning and early childhood education. And so when we think about all those different divisions and probably just listing them off, you can probably see where persons experiencing homelessness play a role. We're also an agency that very much intersects and collaborates with other state agencies and local entities. And so it creates this opportunity again to insert homelessness in the conversation in a very continual way and in a way that allows us to navigate those complexities. So Chelsea talked a little bit about some of the eviction work, and I think people were surprised to hear something like an eviction talked about in a way that wasn't, that there's a distinction between kind of chronic homelessness and episodic homelessness. And I think the layperson thinks, oh yeah, well, somebody who is, living on the street or sleeping on the sidewalk, that's a homeless person. And we know that there are a variety of experiences. And so our work touches on a lot of those different experiences, from someone who is chronically homeless to people who might be, a family who might be couch surfing. And so for me, it really represents the intersection of all of those things. And it also represents the complexity of how many different barriers we need to break down for people, especially from a social services perspective. And I mean policy from kind of how we are designing things that might make things more complicated for folks. So even if you're coming to a kiosk to get services and sign up for SNAP, that is not always a really great experience for folks. So what do we do to make that experience better? But then also, what do we do to make things easier for them on the back end so they don't have to continue to apply for needs sometimes, or be better aware of if their benefits are ending and what we can do to ease them off. So I think homelessness and people experiencing homelessness just kind of represent, again, kind of the cross section of how complex those experiences are, and our role as a policy related arm of the state to be able to do something to address it.
Absolutely. So when you look at kind of the issues that are in front of us right now, and you look at where we're trying to go as a community, the community plan to end homelessness, what do you see as a challenge that is ahead of us that we really have to kind of hone in on and address over the next 18 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's difficult because, as I said, there's so many moving pieces to those experiences. Excuse me. But I think what CHIP is starting to do, and the CoC generally, is taking the first important step, which is identifying key trends and issues. Because if we don't really know where we're starting, it gets really complicated to be able to say, just start throwing ideas at things. And I think being able to break down the different populations who are experiencing homelessness, the ways in which they're experiencing homelessness, the things that complicate that. Can you even get a driver's license or an ID? Being able to break that down and then be able to pinpoint and identify specific strategies, like that's the thing that I think has to happen first before, excuse me, moving on into thinking about larger systemic policy changes. There are short-term wins like that can help people gradually get the skills, get the support they need to move up. And we know it's a process. Obviously, you're talking short-term, but it's a longer-term experience, as we know. And then also defining what success looks like across various populations and experiences that we know, again, we're not going to see improvements like 100% in a year for one individual person, but are there processes and steps along the way to be able to let us set better goals? So I do think that thinking about the plan to end homelessness, that's exactly what it intends to do, right? Is to communicate, here's some longer term goals and some shorter term strategies that we should be able to tackle in the short term that allow us to better serve people who are in that space.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, again, it's really important to talk about, like, what does success look like? What does that mean? And when you look at it from different levels, what that means for a person or a household is different. What it means for how we're serving people, right, is important to say, what does success look like, and how do people define that? And I think that's another area that, as you identified, is really important as we move forward as a community to continue kind of assessing those measures. I think one thing we've all seen this past year is one of the measures of success we talk about is that people spend less and less time experiencing homelessness, right? We want that amount of time to decrease. But this last year has been hard on that, because the focus was, we got to get people safe. And sometimes that means into shelter, which we know is temporary, but shelter stays were longer this year because of the pandemic, because of the housing market. How do we continue to assess and adjust those measures of success so that we're moving forward in a way that is realistic and together, and that, you know, these are moving targets, right? We can set goals, but we have to consistently evaluate and adjust them.
Well, I think you bring a good point too about COVID-19 and how it just showed how quickly we can pool resources and address really complex issues really quickly. And we know there are a lot of strategies that came out of that experience for persons experiencing homelessness that were really great, and or on the verge of homelessness as well. And now that COVID is not over, but you know, a lot of related declarations and funding that's tied to that is starting to wrap up. And so the question is then, how do we make it sustainable? Because there are lots of really creative ways that not just Indy pursued, but lots of other cities and states that worked really well. And so now that we have some pieces of infrastructure available, how do we then continue to support that? Because I think it was a really innovative time, because a lot of people who hadn't historically experienced homelessness, now all of a sudden you're on the edge because you don't have a job, and now you don't have a place to live because you couldn't pay your rent or your mortgage. And we saw a lot of that happen in the beginning of the pandemic. And so we got really creative from a policy lens. And now, you know, we're kind of treating it like, well, the pandemic's over, so all those ideas have to go away. And I think the CoC and the city of Indianapolis are in a unique place to kind of continue that work in a way that, you know, some other places might be quicker to completely get rid of it. So I would just continue to encourage that adaptability and creativity and strategy.
Thank you for that. And so I see Dr. Kane is with us now as well. So I'm going to pull you into the conversation now too, Dr. Kane, as we continue to kind of talk about where we're going and accomplishments that have been made, particularly in the areas of healthcare and housing. So Dr. Kane, again, it's my distinct honor to pull you in and introduce you as the leader of the Marion County Public Health Department, which I think so many of you have kind of seen and heard from the Marion County Health Department over the last 18 months, as they have very significantly stepped into addressing that intersection of healthcare and housing. The Marion County Health Department team has been phenomenal in operating several hotel sites and overflow shelters during the pandemic. And Dr. Kane has been a tireless advocate for homelessness, addressing homelessness, and doing it through permanent solutions. So Dr. Kane, let's kind of bring you into the discussion this afternoon, or this morning, I guess. And can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with the Continuum of Care, and specifically kind of where you see your role sitting in terms of this intersection of health and homelessness? And make sure you come off mute.
Myself.
There you
So thank you. Thank you for those comments. I think one of the major unintended consequences when you are a director of a health department and you're giving direction to the city and the community about what those safeguards should be to prevent any major outbreaks for COVID-19, we recognized early, we recognized very early that a significant number of our homeless populations were becoming infected with COVID-19, but yet residing also inside shelters. And when you had shelters that were greater than 1,000 people inside a building, you set up the perfect conditions to cause a huge outbreak with those individuals, especially if they were not able to do social distancing of at least 6 feet within those facilities, residing in those facilities. So I told the homeless shelters, you can't have any more than 200 or 250 people in a shelter based on your dimensions of your building. And oh my God, why did I make that recommendation? Because I had all those shelters jump all over me to say, well, that's fine, but we don't have the buildings or the space for these other folks if we kick them out. We're not getting money to do that. We have to find that out. So we'll do it, but that's your problem to figure out how to find locations and places for them to go. So working very closely with the city of Indianapolis, one, I went into the hotel business. I initially started out with 6 motels, placing the individual homeless folks there, feeding them in those motels and whatever. But you know, I got a letter all of a sudden one day where somebody had told all the motel owners I was causing outbreaks in their facilities, which I was not. You know, if we rented a motel, we would rent the entire floor, separate interests, that nobody from those other participants in the hotel even had any activity nor any contact whatsoever with the people we were housing. But, you know, they didn't understand that. So we eventually had to actually rent a hotel where a whole tower hotel. And we've housed as many as a couple of hundreds of people, but we've had great partners like the Indiana State Fairgrounds. Cindy was just phenomenal in giving us spaces there where we could house a significant number of people. Our city park gymnasiums were great. So we were able to house a lot of people. But having the staff, when I'm not in the homeless business, created some significant issues. And then the city also got involved, involving space. And so that's how we got into the business. We still have a hotel location where we have quarantine and isolation for people who are infected. And so they reside with us. And we're working on, even once that quarantine is over, I have a separate section where we're still housing homeless people until we can find them a permanent home. So it's a considerable work in progress. It's a new set of skills that we really didn't have in the health department, but it's requiring like our nurses to be over there at the hotels on a daily basis, screening and making sure that there are no major issues related to that. But let me say, our work is to make sure there's a medical home for every homeless person, because they may require medications. How do you get the medications if, you know, they may have no insurance and they can't afford it? So I think our big issues going forward is, how do we identify a medical home, make the process simple enough for them to get their medications? But here's our other biggest problem for a lot of them who live outdoors or in tents. They're concerned that their medications are being stolen, you know, and sometimes some of these meds you can sell. If you're a mental health patient, antidepressant, you know, Valiums and different medications of that nature can be stolen and sold. So how do they safeguard their properties? And it's very difficult for them to carry it around with them during the day, you know, except for their shopping carts or whatever of that nature. So I think our concern is, how do we make the process easy? How do we make the process easy for those who are incarcerated, who are released into our community, having a medical home, being able to get medications where it's affordable for them? And if they have no money, they're able to get the medications regardless and safeguard that. But the biggest issue, I think, is long-term stable housing. I think it's easier to get a job than it is for stable housing, depending on the type of crime you had. So what do we do about all our sex offenders? Okay, it's so tough to get long-term housing for them. How does that happen? And then for those people who have different other crimes, how do we do incentives that landlords will not mind having those individuals as tenants? I think that's another critical issue we're going to have to address. And we unfortunately, like a lot of places, we need more mental health providers.
Yeah.
Okay, just mental health providers. And where can we house them or provide health care for them that's in-house, where you may not always be able to do outpatient therapy for certain clients. So do we have the capacity for that when we have a mental health facility in the city of Indianapolis, but it's for statewide use? So we're having people come all the way from outside our county utilizing statewide hospital rooms for people who may require to be institutionalized for a while.
Yeah.
And I think those are long-term policies, but we're going to have to start working on them now.
Absolutely. So Dr. Kane, first, I want to just say a huge kudos to your leadership and your team at the Marion County Health Department for the creativity and the passion and advocacy you have demonstrated over this last 18 months in particular, as you have made sure that there are safe places for people experiencing homelessness to shelter, to isolate, to quarantine, and to get connected. Your team is one of the hardest working teams I think I've ever seen, and they have really come together in partnership with the CoC in pretty extraordinary ways these last 18 months. I think you just identified too where we need to go in the next 18 months and the complexities that have to be addressed as we work towards the shared vision that everyone deserves to be housed and connected to care. And how do we make sure that there is quality care available, particularly for those with severe mental illness or that need connection to mental health supports? That I'm so excited about your leadership and Dr. Merritt's leadership at FSSA, because that's the question I think that has to be addressed. How do we align strategies around that? How do we align resources around that and make sure that there are enough services and mental health supports for people out there? And I'm confident that the leadership that both of you bring and the vision can help us get there as a community.
Let me say one last thing quickly. Yeah. All of the federally qualified community health centers, we pick like one project that we really focus on. And all of them, HealthNet, Shalom, Blackburn, Ashkenazi's, all of the federally qualified community health systems have made a commitment to be a medical home for the homeless, and working on a plan how to make that happen, where it is going to hopefully be a seamless process. Or when our homeless are in the emergency rooms, how do we make sure as they come in there that they have a medical home, or they can be referred so they get a medical home? But we're going to have a lot of community outreach workers to help assist them. They are not going to be able to do it on their own. So we're trying to work at that level, working on that now.
Absolutely. So why don't we kind of end on this question to both Dr. Kane and Dr. Merritt. What's something that you are proud of or excited about that you're working on right now? And what can we be looking forward to in terms of the next several months?
So if you don't mind, I apologize, Priyanka, but I've got to give a lecture to a group of college students at the University of Arkansas in about 30 minutes. So let me just say, I think the most important thing that we're working on is, one, trying to find a medical home for those who are released locally from our jail system. So that's one that we are working on. Two, we have just helped to develop one of the largest referral softwares for mental health and substance abuse treatment. We're very proud of it. We've worked with about 80 different agencies where it identifies every place you can go for substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment, lists the hours, the time, what's required in order to apply for that. It's sort of like a Bertha software program that we have for the community. So we've just finalized that process. You're going to hear more communications related to it. So we're really excited about that and kicking that off. I gotta go, but thanks, guys.
Thanks so
I owe
much,
you
Dr.
one,
Kane.
Dr. Merritt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kane.
Okay, got you. Okay.
And Dr. Merritt, for you, what is something you're working on right now, you're proud of, you're excited about, that we should all be kind of paying attention to?
Yeah, so I had mentioned a little bit about it in the chat, but we have established several equity specific teams and work groups within FSSA over the past several months. And so we're launching a lot of that work starting in January. And one of the ones that I'm most excited about is our community engagement team. The goal of that team is to, as the name implies, work with different folks, different community partners across the state to understand what their needs are, both in terms of social drivers of health. So it could be housing, it could be food, but also we know different populations experience things differently, whether you're in a rural location, whether you're a person who might be a refugee. So really digging into those experiences to better serve folks. And this is a different angle because historically, as you know, we just kind of can operate on autopilot and kind of this is what we do and this is how we're going to do it. And it kind of breaks up that ability. That group is also responsible for reporting to our teams that work on policy, that work on data, to let them know, hey, here's a better way to measure that. Here's a thing that we probably need to tweak when it comes to, for example, implementing stuff related to Medicaid. And so the goal of that team is going to be really instrumental in kind of holding us accountable. And also, you know, we'll be reaching out to different community partners over the next several months to kind of figure out better ways to collaborate so that we can also be kind of a listening ear and have the responsibility to report back out any progress or steps that we're trying to make as an agency as well.
That is super exciting, and that level of community engagement I think is so vital to, again, going to, hey, we may have always done it this way. That doesn't mean that's how we should continue to do it. And let's really assess how we improve processes and that level of engagement. So thank you for your leadership on that. Dr. Merritt, it's been an honor to have this conversation with you and to highlight some of the work that you have led and continue to lead in Indianapolis and now for our entire state. And we are just grateful for your leadership and engagement with the Indianapolis Continuum of Care and bringing your perspective and lens to this work and how we address the complexities of homelessness and that intersection with health. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Oh, this morning, my time is way off.
It feels like it's been a very long day. That is, I feel the same.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
And of course, I said we'll end early, and that's the kiss of death, right? And then you don't. So I apologize for those that thought, oh, we're gonna get out, and I have some extra time that people think I'm in a meeting. So I'm sorry I gave that false hope, but excited to hear all the work that Dr. Merritt and Dr. Kane are doing and the leadership they're providing. So thanks for staying on. All right, Rachel, you want to wrap us up?
Thank you guys for hanging on here for just another minute. Wanted to make sure folks are aware we do have the calendar set for 2022, if you can believe it. And there'll be an email going out to our listserv as well as anybody who registered to attend today with links to the presentation today, the links that were listed in the presentation and available so you can connect to items online, and the listing of next year's meetings, which we will be hosting in 2022. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do some of these in person. So let's all cross our fingers that that COVID-19, we continue to make progress, and hopefully we will be able to be together again. And finally, just if you do need to connect with us, here is our information. If you have any questions or inquiries, you can visit us on our website and contact us via email. And please take our convening survey or feedback survey when we send it out to folks. We really use that feedback to think through how we present information, what we bring to these meetings. So appreciate the quick 5 minutes of taking that follow-up survey when you're able to. And with that, I wish everyone a lovely day. Thank you.